Hey guys, Lex here again, and today it's time for a new Shield Warrior build for Path of Exile 2's newest update, the Third Edict. So this video is going to go over the Shield Warrior build I created as I progress through the campaign into maps, but I'm also going to go over the new skill gems stuff. I sort of touched upon it in my last video, but after experimenting with all of the shield skills and the new stuff for a good bit, I have a bit more to say about them. I mean, that's pretty much it. I know this is essentially a leveling build slash guide, but I think a lot of what I go over during the skill gems portion of this video is likely going to be relevant into the end game, and will have a big influence on how, my build inevitably evolves to conquer that stuff. So even if you're much further along past the campaign, you'll still most likely get some value out of this one. Also, quick shout out to my good friend Steven Yaffe. He actually designed the new logo, profile picture, whatever you want to call it, for my channel. I think it looks absolutely sick. The guy is a super talented artist and actually offered to make this for the channel for free, and I was like, no dude, I'm paying you. And I think he did an excellent job. Couldn't be happier. I'm going to link his YouTube channel and his art station in the description box of this video. He's been busy for a while, but if you're interested in his character design or concept art process, he will likely be picking things back up again very soon, so he tells me. So there you go. Anyways, let's get into the Shield Warrior build, starting with the skill gems and what progressing through Acts 1 through 4 looks like, as well as the interludes. Alright, so in order to save time, I'm going to go over each skill gem that I went with in order, what I use in Act 1, Act 2, etc. But as I am talking about them, I'll also go over how they performed later on in the campaign, if I ended up sticking with them, and how their support gems might have changed later on, or if I outright dropped them from my build. And don't worry, I know a lot of you are interested in what I have to say about the juicy new shield wall. Oh, it's in there. But let's start from the top. Old reliable Mace Strike. I mean, to be honest, in Act 1, you're going to be relying on this move a ton to deal single target damage or to prime things for Boneshatters, either the one-handed or two-handed version. Honestly, like early on, it's a bit of a free-for-all, because you obviously shouldn't stick with a blue one-handed mace if you find a good rare two-hander. But yeah, I mean, in Act 1 and even for a good bit in Act 2, this is a pretty damn solid source of single target damage, especially really early on. There isn't a whole lot else you can do when a boss or rare mob is heavy stunned, so you just spam that Mace Strike, bro. And full transparency, this is something I used all the way to Act 4, a lot less in Act 4 for sure, but sometimes I'd throw one out there if I wanted to finish off a mob that was low and Resonating Shield was going to take too long to channel to finish it off, and it also helps keep up rage stacks with how I had it socketed. Speaking of which, sockets on Mace Strike, just rapid attacks 1 and rage 1 all the way through, just faster DPS, and being able to gain 3 rage per hit is good for damage on all of your skills. Each stack of rage gives you 1%, so building that up is useful. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about it before, and that's all I really got to say about it. Later on, you can start socketing in some higher level support gems to crank up its damage, but that would be way later, just because, all of your shield skills are going to take priority before that happens. Next up, Raise Shield. Truth be told, I only really used this through Act 1 up until I got Resonating Shield. Raise Shield, I think, is awesome for the earliest parts of your playthrough. Obviously, it's your only way to trigger Magma Barrier right when you get that skill, but also the Shield Bash is amazing for stunning bosses and rares. Seriously, it has some crazy stun buildup, and it mini-stun bosses pretty much every time it hits them, so I like it for early Act 1, but again, I pretty much stopped using this completely by Act 2, mostly because I had a better source of stun buildup, and the hitbox is just so small, the damage is okay-ish, I guess. It's just not something that I think scales very well, but maybe I'm wrong. Next up is Boneshatter. So this is obviously the best way for you to clear groups early on in your playthrough, starting in Act 1. As you hit mobs with Mace Strike or other skills like Rolling Slam, you will build up stun on those monsters and prime them for stun. Most of you know this, but yeah, it's basically your group clearing ability. You hit those mobs that are primed for stun, and you create a shockwave around them that deals damage to other mobs within the radius, but also more shockwaves will spawn from other mobs primed for stun, so you can create like a little bit of a chain reaction when it comes to clearing pretty early on. It's also a way to deal some burst damage and heavy stun bosses a little earlier to set them up for some big damage. And in Act 1, this usually means spamming Mace Strike. But later on, even in Act 1, there are some other useful abilities for you to take advantage of that heavy stun window, like Perfect Strike. But to be honest, I used Boneshatter all the way till about Act 3-ish, where I still used it, but much less than before, as there were some other skills that were doing a better job group clearing for me. Support gems I threw in here are Impact Shockwave, super obvious. This doubles its damage in a small radius when heavy stunning something, essentially. And then we have Magnified Effect 1 here. I didn't give it the second version just because, while I was using some other skills for group clearing when I had the option to do so, There you go. All right, now let's talk about the new shield charge. In my last video, I commented on how it is a no cooldown skill now and how they gutted the damage, but upon actually using it, yeah, they gutted the damage. It feels pretty terrible for damage. However, that's not to say that it's useless. This thing still does a ton of stun buildup, which is why it has a spot here and continues to do so on my current version of the build, though truth be told, I do use it a bit less than I did early on, but in Acts 1, 2, and even a bit of 3, it's a great way to build up stun, and is also a great gap closer for those jumpier bosses or rares. Like if something leaps away from you mid-fight, charge right back at them for a little extra damage and stun buildup. But just to be clear, this is no longer the big boss killer it once was, and I don't think it will be later on. The damage is just no longer there, and the animation time feels a bit rough, especially early on. And as one last tip, and this is something I mentioned in a previous video, they have not changed this yet, you actually do not suffer any stun buildup while you are blocking while using this skill. So if you notice you're getting close to a heavy stun from blocking so much, you may opt to use this skill as a way to get off like a quick magma barrier or something, or as a way to retreat so that you can reposition and empty that stun bar. Anyway, support gems for almost your entire playthrough are going to involve stun 1 to 2, and stomping ground, which was also heavily nerfed actually. Stomping ground used to scale its damage with strength, which was kind of crazy. It would hit super hard the more strength you had, so it was easy to boost your damage up on that thing by just stacking a bunch of strength. But now it simply scales with your default attack damage, so they call it, which isn't terrible. This means it can still scale quite a bit, but you need like a good weapon for it to hit harder, which honestly isn't that hard to do, and I'm kind of cool with it. It kind of makes it like a true sword and board support gem. And lastly, when you can afford to, brink 1 or 2 so that you can still get that juicy Boneshatter damage in early on. Though honestly, I would not prioritize getting the 3rd support gem slot on this ability over some of the other ones until way later on, like Act 3 or beyond, to be honest. Definitely not a priority compared to some of the other skills. Next up is Infernal Cry, and actually real quick I'm going to equip it where shield charges because I am no longer using this ability, but I did use it a lot earlier on, so let's go over it very quickly. So this is a shout that empowers your attacks based on the power of the monsters you tap with this one. Here's the calculation if you need to see it again, but for this build I basically used it to help clear groups and to empower my Boneshatters, though it took me a long time to break that muscle memory of empowering my shield charges. Guys, do not empower your shield charges. Empower your Boneshatters or perfect strikes earlier on. Shield charge doesn't hit for shit, and it will waste the potential of that empower damage. And that's pretty much it to this one. I think I used this one up until Act 2 and then swapped it out for Fortifying Cry, a new skill which we'll be talking about in a bit. But for Infernal Cry support gems, I went with Tireless, I guess. Normally I'd go Premeditation, but I don't think that's in the game anymore. At least I can't find it, so I mean, that's what you should go with, but I would not even prioritize throwing a support gem in this one either, especially earlier on when, you know, they're a bit scarce. Next up is the new Magma Barrier. Shortly after getting shield charge is basically when you have the chance to get your first spirit gem from the King in the Mist, so it makes sense to go over this one now. Basically, this move has changed quite a bit. So previously, and I went over this in my last video, Magma Barrier had to be timed with an enemy's attack. So whatever you were using to activate this timed window, you know, resonating shield, raise shield, shield charge, etc., an enemy had to hit you with a blockable attack during a very short window, and then Magma Barrier would go off, essentially, kind of like a pseudo-timed parry or something. And back then, if you timed your Magma Barriers correctly over and over, it basically had no cooldown, and you can just clear maps by using this thing with Trample Toe or boosting up its area of effect in some way. Super strong ability. It hit like a truck, and it was fast. The Magma Barrier of today is actually not as bad as I thought. Initially, I thought this was going to feel terrible, but it actually has won me over a little bit. So the new Magma Barrier no longer has to be timed. It just charges up over 8 seconds, which, yes, means that you can only use it every 8 seconds instead of as quickly as you want. That is easily the worst part of the new Magma Barrier. However, not having to worry about the timing is kind of nice. Even though I barely had a problem with it before, it still somehow feels a bit more reliable and consistent in that way. And it also hits significantly harder than before. So this is less of a rapid group clearing ability and more of like a hardcore nuke in a small AoE. It also gives you a big passive block chance buff, you know, 25% increased chance, and it also gives you an endurance charge every time it goes off like previously, so it's not quite as fast, but it still happens. Not too bad. I use this thing from Act 1 all the way to early maps, and I plan on continuing to use it. It just feels quite useful as a way to get a chunk of damage in on a rare or a boss as you are channeling Resonating Shield or at the end of a shield charge. though it does feel bad when it goes off like at the start of your charge when no mobs are around you or something. You just basically wasted this 8-second cooldown, but you know, that's just something you gotta roll with. Last thing I'll say that makes it feel better is that it was indirectly buffed due to a change in how blocking works in general with this update, and that is all attacks can be blocked now, as long as you aren't seeing that red glowing animation lighting up a mob or a boss. This includes area of effect attacks and such too, so this gives you a lot more opportunity to get Magma Barrier off, especially on bosses. Like, just channel some resonating shield during a boss swing or combo and you're good, as long as, you know, they're not glowing red. Support gems are basically just focused on boosting up its damage as much as possible. You would think to reduce the cooldown I would prioritize something like compressed duration, but it is currently bugged, at least at the making of this video, and does nothing. There is no way to reduce the cooldown as far as I know, so we just, you know, we just go for the damage. Fire attunement first thing, and then elemental attunement 1 into 2 when you have a chance. And for the third socket, I actually went with close combat until you get higher tier supports for fire mastery. This ability has moderate priority when it comes to throwing support gems at it, so just keep it in mind. Next up, Resonating Shield. I don't think I saw anything in the patch notes about this skill, or maybe I missed something, but somehow it feels a lot stronger. And when you get this ability towards the end of Act 1, it really starts feeling like the build is making sense. This skill just feels very, very strong these days, guys. I don't know what it is, but this is what I replaced Mace Strike with on my mouse button hotkey as soon as I got this, and it became my main way to prime groups for stun, while also breaking their armor and increasing the damage they take, and also just straight up wiping groups for me without using anything else sometimes. This ability I used all the way through the campaign and beyond. I would say this is one of the foundational skills of this build. Its damage is decent, but the utility and the ability to break armor quickly to amplify the damage of your other skills is great, honestly, especially for anything socketed with exploit weakness, which is great for helping us wipe out bosses and tougher rares much more quickly. Yeah, I love this ability. It's also a great way to trigger Magma Barrier, as I mentioned earlier. You can just channel this one in front of something you want to hit with Magma Barrier, and that skill I might also socket with exploit weakness at some point. But anyways, all right, support gems. A huge change from GGG this update is Armor Explosion. This used to be a tier 2 support gem, but now it is tier 1, so you can socket this into Resonating Shield as soon as you have a support gem, which is what you should do. It's very good, deals decent damage, and builds up the stun meter to queue up those big bone shatters pretty early on. Rage 1, 2, and 3 is also decent here, since we will be spamming this one a lot once we get this skill, though I sometimes threw stun in there to prime things for stun quicker in the early acts. I think if you have a lower or kind of mid armor shield for where you're at in the game, you may not prime things for stun as quickly, so you might want to throw stun 1 in there instead or something. Third slot is for Armor Demolisher 1 or 2, straightforward, just breaks more armor, but yeah, this is a very strong ability and we use this all the time, most likely into the end game. Next up is Perfect Strike, and you know what, let me actually swap out Infernal Cry for this because my current version of the build no longer uses this one, but again, I just want to talk about it since I did use this earlier on. Knowing that, this is more of an honorable mention, I'd say, but if you happen to get another tier 5 skill gem in late Act 1, definitely go with this. The biggest issue with Shield Warriors early on is single target damage. Again, best you got is, other than this, is Mace Strike spam, so I would consider this one as well. I mean, I went for it and I basically used it a bit into Act 2. It's honestly a decent fit into the build since you are heavy stunning things pretty often with the shield abilities. You can line up some good opportunities to Perfect Strike during boss fights, and since weapon swap is now instant, you can even link this skill to like a two-hander if you really want to hit something hard early on. Support gems are easy on this one. Rapid Attacks 1 to speed up its animation, and Window of Opportunity 1 shortens the release window of this skill, but you get more damage for timing it, so totally worth it. It's a decent ability that will get you through to Act 2, at least for bossing specifically. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. This is the new shield wall, and it is... yeah, it's great. It's another foundational part of this build, I'd say. So how to describe this ability? Well, I'd say its damage is decent as the boss killing substitute for what we miss from the old shield charge. This thing hits crazy hard when socketed appropriately. The biggest weakness is that you need to shorten the animation time in any way that you can, which we've done with the rapid attack support gem and some nodes on the passive skill tree. But yeah, you can destroy these with shield charges or war cries, instantly, and that's where most of the damage comes from. When you destroy the walls with your own abilities, it deals 100% more damage. Ever since you get this ability in Act 2, you should be using this all the time in boss fights going forward. This and Fortifying Cry, which we'll be going over soon. It's a potent combo that deals a ton of damage and stun buildup on bosses. Honestly, just feels great. You just have to make sure you are positioning yourself correctly and choosing the right moments to spawn these walls, since there is still a bit of an animation attached to them, even when you've reduced it a bit. And you want to make sure that there is enough room to spawn more of the wall just to increase its chance to hit. I think the damage remains the same as far as I understand. But that's the new damage combo, Shield Wall and Fortifying Cry, as I'm sure some of you have probably discovered on your own at this point, though I tend to use Resonating Shield a good bit in between each combo to break the boss's armor for that exploit weakness bonus damage. It is significant, and also if the boss is heavy stunned, I try my best to spawn 2 walls before shouting for even more damage. Last thing to note, try to get the walls as close to the boss as you can during a heavy stun, but not too close. This takes a bit of practice, but if you spawn the wall on top of the boss, sometimes it'll just break and deal almost no damage while also consuming the fully broken armor debuff. This is obviously only applicable if you're using exploit weakness. But yeah, you don't want this to happen as it's a bit of a waste, but you do want to be close enough for the Fortifying Shout shield shockwave damage, since the radius is a bit smaller, and we want to make sure that we're hitting the boss with these ideally. Support gems, no surprise, rapid attacks 2 or 1 here if you are earlier on in your playthrough. Probably one of the first things you should put into this, and then ways to just up the damage essentially. Exploit weakness so that you can get some extra use out of that armor break you are applying. And I think I had Brutality 1 and 2 socketed here earlier on, but at some point my build switched over to Avatar Fire, and I'm now dealing fire damage. So I went with Fire Attunement and Elemental Armament. Fire Attunement is just a solid pick for damage as well, even if you're not Avatar Fire. But you don't want to run Brutality and Fire Attunement, because Brutality cancels out all elemental damage, so just something to keep in mind. One last quick note here, I wouldn't be surprised if they nerfed this one, honestly. It's hitting like really hard, so just be aware that your reliance on this interaction may have to change. And I think if they did nerf this one, my focus would probably switch to cranking up Magma Barrier damage as much as possible for the new boss killer. Seems like it has some potential if I'm looking at the numbers right with some of the higher skill gem levels. But anyways, next up is Fortifying Cry, the other heavy hitter in this build. We are using this as our main way to break those shield walls. I know in the reveal stream they emphasize that shield charge can do this now, and sometimes it makes sense to do that if you want a little extra stun buildup, but overall it feels faster to just slap down a wall and shout. But functionally, it grants you guard based on the power of monsters you hit with this ability. Similar to Infernal Cry, it's calculated again in both number and type, which is kind of nice. And as far as I know, guard is like a temporary energy shield. It just absorbs the listed amount of damage before your health. Though earlier on in your playthrough, when you get this in like late Act 2, this has an 8-second cooldown, so it's a bit hard to make use of that guard, you know, to make it super useful. Unless you are a Warbringer and go with the no cooldowns Warcry node as your first ascendancy pick, then it becomes a bit more significant in my opinion. It's a lot easier to build up that guard as you're spamming it to blow up corpses and assist with clearing and empowering your shield skills. This is something that is new and unique, yet like yes, you could empower your skills before, but this shout empowers only your skills that involve a shield, which includes Resonating Shield. So as a bit of a spoiler, yes, I ended up going Warbringer and going with that Warcaller's Bellow Ascendancy node for the no cooldowns exploding corpses on Warcries thing, and this is when Boneshatter started falling off a bit for me, because alternating an empowered Resonating Shield hits with a Fortifying Cry over and over becomes a pretty legit way to clear all the way through to early maps. Sometimes I'll channel Resonating Shield a little longer for an extra tick of damage or to prime things for a stun, or if I want to Magma Barrier a high health mob to then blow up with the next Fortifying Cry. Basically up to you to feel it out in whatever situation, but damn, this feels really good. You may not be the fastest, but you definitely feel unstoppable clearing like this, just shouting, resonating, and then you should start with a shout to empower that first hit. Last thing I'll talk about is its interaction with Shield Wall. We've already gone over this basically. It'll blow up your shield walls immediately and create the little shockwaves around each wall segment, so make sure the walls are as close to your target without breaking them if possible. But one extra notable thing here is that Fortifying Cry will both empower and subsequently use up that empower at the same time when you blow up your shield walls this way. So you're getting that bonus damage on use when the walls explode, rather than having to use a resonating shield or shield charge or something, which makes the combo quite potent. Honestly, such a strong skill, absolutely love it. Support gems are focused on a mix of utility and damage while also trying to reduce the cost in some way, because it costs a bit of mana and you'll run out quickly if you're using it so often. So I initially went with efficiency at first, but I eventually switched it to life tap, as the cost of the skill gets higher as you're slotting in those higher tier support gems. And then I went for Raging Cry for more rage gain and sustain, as well as Heavy Swing for more shockwave damage in acts like 1 through 3, though I switched to Fire Attunement once I went Avatar of Fire sometime in Act 4. Time of Need, not going to spend a lot of time on this one, just extra survivability through healing and curse removal and ailment removal. Just slap that compressed duration support gem into this one so that it goes off more often. It actually works here, unlike Magma Barrier, and obviously cannibalism when you have enough spirit to socket this in for some heals on monster kills. Last one is Berserk, and this is right before maps, when you're able to get most of that extra spirit stuff. This just makes your rage more effective, so you get more damage out of your rage stacks, though you suffer some very mild health drain when not losing rage, so something to keep in mind. Honestly, pretty easy to cancel out with something like Vitality, the one support gem I have here at the moment, just straight up health regen. Super simple. We'll probably up this to rank 2 once I have enough spirit. And that's what the skill gems are at the moment, guys. We'll be progressing into maps and endgame using this build, and I will update you on how it evolves. I'll include a link to this build down in the description box just for you to refer to with all the skill gems and stuff that we just went over. But let's keep it moving with the passive skill tree and how it looks through different parts of the campaign. Alright, passive skill tree time. I'm just going to show you a quick mouse over of what the whole thing looks like at the moment while I'm talking here. I think I'll basically go through the whole thing step by step, like how I progress to the point that you see right now, starting on, which nodes I prioritize and travel to in Act 1, Act 2, etc. And I think I want to do it this way just to save time instead of showing you what the build looked like at each act of my playthrough. So hopefully you're cool with that. Let's get started. So yeah, let's start with Act 1. Early on, I just went with this top route until I could grab this notable. Brutal. It has a bit of everything that you want early on, just damage, strength, stun buildup, etc. And then I popped over to this one over here, which I'm still using, Smash. Sorry. Yeah, so this one greatly increases your damage against heavy stunned enemies, which you'll be doing all the time against bosses and rares. Super worth it early on especially. Then I go down this way and grab these two, just some extra armor, strength, and health regen, cranks up your survivability a bit, and then down here for some shield stuff. Defender's Resolve I think is worth it at the moment because monsters are dealing a lot more stun buildup than they were before the update. I think they said around 30% more, so you want to be able to empty that meter more quickly or else you'll be falling a lot and potentially getting killed, so for now I recommend this. Next I went up here to grab these skill speed nodes into Blood Rush. It helps a bit with mana costs with your skills by converting a portion of their cost into life costs, but we're here mostly for the skill speed. Things like shield charge and obviously shield wall are super slow, so we want to have this to help out a bit overall. Useful for almost every skill we use, so I think it's a no-brainer. I think going over this way to Burning Strikes next is okay, honestly kinda optional, but I decided to go for it when I had Magma Barrier and Perfect Strike, just because it makes these two nodes relevant. You'll deal more damage against burning enemies, and Burning Strikes is just strong all around. Gaining X amount of damage from physical tends to be pretty strong, so I tend to grab this one, if not early on, at some point during my playthrough when I'm using more fire stuff. Then after that I go for these one-handed nodes. Again, in Act 1 you are relying heavily on Boneshatter, Mace Strike, maybe Perfect Strike, so I think it makes total sense to grab these one-handed damage nodes and notables, especially Reaving gives you a 15 dex bonus, so it makes socketing those support gems a little easier, and honestly a lot of your support gems with shield skills benefit from your default attack damage, which is Mace Strike, things like Stomping Ground and Armor Explosion, so it's good to have this early on. Just way too useful all around in my opinion, though I may spec out of these later depending on what the build is shaping up to be. Progressing down this way I grabbed these three for some stun threshold, strength, and life, just a chunk of survivability, and I want to say around now we are hitting like Act 2-ish or late Act 1 territory, but I just continued down this way and grabbed these very strong hit damage nodes, which they removed some of these swing speed slowdowns from, so they're very strong nodes now. Definitely grab these. And since we're in Act 2 theoretically where you get your ascendancy, I'll go over what you should go. Obviously it's Warbringer, seems like a strong ascendancy this time around, and honestly the first thing you should go with is the Warcaller's Bellow. Just helps with clearing and having no cooldown on Fortifying Cry is great. Well, you can bypass its cooldown by consuming an endurance charge, but you remove that requirement and it just feels way better. And sometime in Act 3, honestly, I just went with more armor break because I want to try playing around with the negative armor amplifying fire damage with imploding impacts at the top here. I don't know if I want to go Turtle Charm this time around. Seems kind of bait, to be honest. Like, if I am taking 20% damage from active blocks, which I think is what is meant by this, I am not interested. There are a ton of big damage hits from bosses that I want to block for Magma Barrier, and I don't want to even take 20% of those hits, so not so crazy about that. But if this only applies to passive block, I might consider it. I gotta look into that. I actually don't know. But anyways, let's get back to the tree. Back in Act 2 where we left off is this shield cluster here, but honestly I didn't grab this until quite a bit later. Survivability felt okay, so I just kept going for damage as much as I could. But this notable here was buffed. Vigilance gives so much in just one node. You know, gain 10 life on a block, 2% maximum block chance, and 12% increased block chance. Felt a little too good to pass up. Then I started going for the armor break stuff here, a combination of increasing the amount of armor you break, increasing the effect of fully broken armor, which is just more damage, and then of course how much damage you deal against fully armor broken enemies, which is basically what you're hitting all the time. Act 3 into Act 4 territory, I think here my timeline might be a little off, but I still think this progression makes sense to you guys if you're following along. But I actually traveled all the way down here to grab this new notable, the Molten One's Gift, which makes your armor break effects apply to fire damage. Very, very strong in my opinion, to be honest. I'm always super excited for different ways to crank up fire damage, and this is definitely one of them. Quick note though, you definitely want to grab this before Avatar of Fire, in my opinion. If you just grab Avatar of Fire alone, honestly, it's probably just a nerf to most of your damage because it converts 75% of your damage to all fire damage, and you lose like 25% of, you know, the physical damage you're dealing. So I know that you basically only have Magma Barrier at this point that is benefiting from the armor break effect, but definitely grab this one first, and then we can go up here and grab Avatar of Fire. And these Ignite Magnitude, Fire Penetration, and Fire Damage nodes, alongside these two very useful notables. Fulmination, which increases flammability magnitude, which is basically the new ignite chance, as well as 40% more damage against burning enemies, and this is mostly for bosses because they will be lit up with your shield walls, now dealing fire damage, and this will probably make subsequent ones hit even harder as the fight progresses. This heavy stun one is also for a similar purpose. Shield walls currently have a ton of stun buildup, as does shield charge, so bosses will often be heavy stunned for you to burst them down at some point. Definitely recommend. Also grab the shield nodes up here to hunker down, more max block, more healing on block, and less knockback as kind of whatever, but I might grab this top branch here for some more damage at some point, so it makes sense to grab these for now. Trying out the armor applying to elemental damage thing here, not sure how useful it'll actually be, but I want to give it a whirl regardless. And then I moved up a bit more to grab these very good AoE nodes and melee damage nodes. Well, as far as where to go from here, I am interested in this cluster of fire nodes up here and potentially the self-ignite stuff, where you ignite yourself and you get a bunch of bonus damage from this node here, that you basically have to invest in some reduced ignite magnitude so that you aren't killing yourself with your own ignite. Super interesting interaction, and I'll definitely be trying it out. I'm also interested in this cluster of nodes here, where empowered attacks are going to be dealing more damage, but also there are some interesting effects mixed in here, like explosive empowerment. Seems kind of good for clearing, or at least assisting in your clearing, and cremating cries seems pretty great since it allows your empowered attacks to gain fire damage. I will ultimately have to invest in some defensives though, so I am likely going to go the energy shield armor hybrid route that I went last time and grab some of these nodes when it makes sense to. Maybe Zealot's Oath, I found that very useful when stacking health regen on my gear, and maybe some more shield block things where it makes sense to for damage mitigation, maybe some more armor applying to elemental damage nodes, etc. But you'll just have to wait to see what the build evolves into as I progress through maps. Again, one more reminder, check the description box below for links to the passive skill tree and the skill gems I use in this build. But last thing I want to talk about very quickly is the gear. So this won't take long because I just hit maps and I haven't really traded at all. I'll just mouse over everything again as I'm speaking, but basically just using what I found and a few lucky crafts. Overall, I think plus melee skill is once again one of the best item rolls you can hope for. This will increase the damage of your most damagey shield skills by a lot, especially shield wall and magma barrier. So we want to make sure we get that item roll, you know, where you can, on your weapon, on your necklace, and on your gloves. Other than that, I just winged it with what I found, honestly. As I said earlier, I think accuracy is likely a dead roll in this build since everything is close range and we don't really need any accuracy to hit often. I think they changed that with the most recent update, which is nice. Though I would love an elemental damage to all attacks roll on my weapon after going Avatar of Fire, so keep that in mind. A big damage boost if you can manage to find one with that roll and melee skill. Oh, and obviously you want a higher armor shield. The higher the armor, the harder all of your shield stuff is going to hit. I got this one with physical damage reduction, which is super nice. I just need to, you know, work on my other defenses a bit. Please don't mind those resistances. I haven't started maps yet. Give me a break. But that's pretty much the build, guys. Again, links in the description box for the build. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Keep an eye out for build updates as I progress into maps and late maps and onwards. We may have to pivot if GGG ends up nerfing shield wall, but we'll figure that out once we get there. Anyways, I'm going to leave you with a bit of gameplay footage. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Shall you as a mate? Only one of us walked away from here. Your hand is knife. This changes. I am the true Nakura Makuri. You should not have come here!